Hey everybody, welcome to another interview in the series on Unraveling. Today I'm really excited to share Juna Mustad with you. If you've read the book, you'll see a couple things. One is that Juna was the writer of the foreword, and I chose her very intentionally because, for one, she means so much to me, all the different ways she's helped me over the years, and I really value and honor her voice, but she held me through so much of the story. So we were just talking about, I just shared with Juna that according to my Facebook memories, this day 5 years ago was our very first session. And I share that session in the book, and I talk a lot about how it really helped me tune into what my true essence was, and that I wanted to love people, that my heart was so much bigger than I was allowing it to be, and that I really wanted to share that love openly. And it was also the last day that I saw Brett alive. So a couple days later, a couple days from now, it will be 5 years since his death. And so Juna was somebody that very divinely came into my life. I remember Googling online for different things and coming across your profile on an expert site. And it was another one of those moments of like, you just like jumped off the screen at me. It was just like, click me. I could just feel your energy, and I booked a session with you, and we've been working together on and off for 5 years. So I'm really excited that you're here. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to be here, and I was just amazed hearing it's been 5 years since our first session. I can't even believe it. I'm like, 5 years ago? And Stephanie, it was just such an honor to witness you on this huge journey and get to support you, and then now to get to write your foreword and get to see where you are now and read your incredible book and your incredible story and really actually be let in so much more to what was actually going on for you during that time. Just all of it has been so powerful, and it's just such an honor to know you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I would love for you to take a minute or two to just share a little bit more about you and what it is that you do.
What do? I do several different things. I'd say my greatest love is really helping people become more of who they really are, and helping people live a life that's aligned with that essence self, that soul that you spoke to kind of in our first session together. Yeah. And I actually really remember that first session because it stood out to me and helped me actually really get clear on, oh my gosh, I love this woman. I love what we just did together. This is actually more of the work I want to do with people. So I'm a mixture of an intuitive and a coach, and I'm also trained as a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm also an executive coach, and I bridge all those worlds together in the work that I do with people. So I weave in intuition with trauma therapy, with somatic exercises, with coaching, but just like I shared, I think my greatest love is really using intuition and coaching to help people live a life that's fully aligned with who they really are. And that can be really hard work to do. We hit up against trauma and fear and limiting beliefs. And so to have the skills to navigate those things, I think is really important.
Yeah. And you're so gifted at that. And I really would love to start our conversation there around intuition. One of the things that, as I was reading through the book and editing it, you know, I love my book and I never want to read it again. I've read it so many times. But one thing I noticed myself, I worked really hard not to be repetitive, but one thing that I did say repeatedly and that I left in there on purpose and then spoke to in the resources section was, I talked a lot about knowing things in my bones. Like I couldn't necessarily tell you why it was a good idea or why not. Like I didn't always know why I was doing certain things, but there were so many moments after Brett's death that I just knew in my bones I had to do something. I had to feel something, or I had to show up in a certain way, or I had to go in this direction, or whatever it was that I was doing. And that was all intuitive. And I had been doing my own work for quite a while before that whole period. So I was far more in tune with my intuition. But I would love if you could share a little bit about both how you would describe intuition and the power of it, but also how you really came into this place of trusting your gift, both for yourself, but also for your clients.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, I think, how would I define intuition? I'd say that intuition is being able to hear the voice of our soul, like what our soul, our essence, are the innermost part of our being really is trying to communicate with us, really most needs. And cultivating intuition isn't just like another handy skill or tool. It's really just being able to listen and listen deeply to that voice and to what most wants and needs to happen in any given moment. And ultimately, our soul is using intuition to kind of say, hey, here's the path that's most aligned for us, whether it's a relationship or leaving a relationship or pausing to take good care of ourselves, whatever is coming through. It's really the path of greatest alignment. Doesn't mean it's always the easy path, but it is the path of greatest alignment. So yeah, I really appreciated that in reading your book, how much you knew certain things. Like it was in your bones were telling you, no, you need to slow down right now. No, I need to actually follow this right now. No, I need to push people away right now. And that can be really hard for us to want to listen to that because we're afraid, like, is this voice right? Or, oh my gosh, that means people might not like me, or they might pull away from me, or, there's all sorts of perceived consequences of following that deep inner knowing, and not just going back to the status quo. But as I'm sure you've experienced, and you certainly have shared about it in your story, when we don't follow our intuition and we kind of try to do it right and be the good girl or follow how we've been doing things, we start to lose touch with our deep selves, and then our body might flare up with physical issues to kind of highlight that. You asked a second question, and I can't remember it now, around
your path, your journey to really cultivating this skill that you have, and also trusting it.
Yeah. I'd say that for me, as a child, I had a lot of kind of inner knowing experiences. I also had some things where, I saw things as a child that didn't make sense. I saw energies. I heard some voices. I didn't know how to really organize all of that. And as a little kid, it really scared me. But those feelings and those experiences started to really grow for me in later life. And I ended up attending an intuitive school for about 6 years after college. And that really helped me grow my intuition. But I think there tends to be like kind of 4 main ways that we can tap in intuitively. We like to call them the 4 clairs. There's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, claircognizance, which is a clear knowing, kind of like maybe what you were speaking to, of just like a knowing would come through. Clairsentience is a feeling, like we feel things in our body, which also might be, part of what you've experienced too. And then clairaudience is clear hearing. And in this intuitive school, they really taught us a lot of claircognizance and I think clear hearing, clear knowing, but not as much around the clear feeling. And so after I left that intuitive school, I really learned what it is to come into my body through some of the coaching programs I attended. And from there, this whole other channel of accessing intuition through the body wisdom, like my gut would get tight, or I'd have an overwhelming sense of like a feeling or an emotion. I feel like my clear knowing and my clear feeling like really grew through learning to inhabit the body. And I'd say that now, as an intuitive, one of the ways that I feel like I've really grown these muscles of intuition is through developing body awareness and having a greater emotional intelligence, I'd say.
Yeah.
So that's a little summary of kind of how these muscles have been growing.
Yeah, I love that. And I always describe working with you as, there's a lot of different types of coaching out there. And what I love about what you do is that it helps me get to what I already know, or is already right for me. So it's not like you're ever sitting there. And sometimes I'll even ask you really specific questions. Like, we worked together a little bit before the book came out, and we talked about like, what do I need to do to get it out there, and even with business stuff, like, what am I missing? And in the personal realm, I struggle with decision. And so what I have found with our work together is that you act as a mirror to reflect back to me things that I already know, things that are already going on. It's not like, I think some people, probably not most of my audience, but some people, like, they don't understand the intuitive piece. Like, it feels like, it's out there, or they think it's the same as like a psychic who can like read your future. And my experience of it working with you has never been that way. It's always been this, you tuning into the energy of the situation, my energy, even things beyond that. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, but like, you call in guides, like you tune into the energy of it and you reflect it back. I never feel like it's like, you should do this because that's what I think. It's very much like here's what I'm picking up on, and how does that land for you?
Yeah, I think that's really important to me, because I think there's been, certainly for me, when I first got into this work, I had this like perception that intuitives and psychics could see things I can't see, and they can tell me what to do. They can tell me the right answer, as if there is a right answer. And whenever I approached receiving work like this from that perspective, from that mindset, I'd often, first of all, rebel against whatever the intuitive or psychic told me to do. and then I would project onto them that they were maybe going to be disappointed in me, or it's just like this whole weird, or I'd resent them for how dare they say this to me. And I played this whole game. And I think that's where I really love weaving coaching with this work, because from the coaching perspective, you see the client as whole and resourceful and capable. And when I work with clients, I love to really see that they actually have the greatest wisdom, the greatest information inside of them. And how do we mine that? And like you said, even reflect that. But if insights do come through that are kind of like very clear, I like to hold them lightly, as opposed to say, hey, here's what you should do. Because I really do believe that we are our own greatest source for the information and wisdom that comes through. Nobody else can tell us anything. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That makes me happy that that's resonated.
Yeah. And that's why I keep coming back to you. And something while we were talking that popped into my head, I was thinking about our first session. So it actually might have been our second session. I think it was our second session that we had 5 years ago. And I remember, because I know we had 2 sessions and Brett passed away. And I remember being like, coming home from the funeral and being in this place of like rawness and feeling really isolated, feeling devastated, but also numb, like this horrible mix of emotions, and not knowing what to do with myself, not knowing how to begin moving forward. Like, I know that the year hadn't really started yet. Like, it was right around the new year. And so I wasn't really aware of how much I was about to be struggling with my memory and being able to be in my own life and my own work yet. But I had a sense that like I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I remember emailing you, and I was afraid to, not because of you, but because I was already becoming aware of how uncomfortable it made people that I had been in this situation. I was also feeling a lot of guilt and shame. Like, it was so close afterwards that I was feeling, it was very much a like, I don't know if I can handle having any clue what other people think of me right now. Like, because I'm the girl that broke his heart. Like, we broke up and he died 2 days later, like all of these things. But I remember feeling, and this always happens with you, like your face just like pops into my mind when it's like time to talk to Juna, and your face kept popping in. And so I reached out to you with a little bit of hesitation to tell you what was going on and to ask if you thought it was something that you could help with. And I bring that up because I'm curious what it was like to be on the other end of that, and more from a perspective not just of like as a coach, but as a person holding space for people going through a really hard time. That's something that I don't feel like we talk enough about, that we don't really have the skills for as a culture and society or family members. And very few people were really able to hold that space for me. And granted, with us, it was in this like coaching capacity.
Yeah.
But like there was no part that ever felt like you were like, ooh, or even that you were nervous about like showing up in that space. I'm just wondering if you could speak to what it's like to be on that side, like really holding space for people going through challenging chapters and big life transitions. And if there's any bits of wisdom or guidance you could give to people who maybe know somebody going through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And yeah, I'd say that the number one thing that for me has been instrumental in feeling like I'm available to be with people through anything is just this practice for me of not kind of categorizing certain feelings as bad and other ones as good, or certain feelings as right or other ones as wrong. And for me, again, that's kind of where emotional intelligence and being able to be with mindfulness and emotional intelligence are two great loves of mine. And that ability to be here in my body with anything going on for me has helped. And it's not easy, and I'm not a professional at it, but I've definitely grown my skills in being able to be with anything internally. And I think humans are way more sensitive and empathic than we even know. And so if someone we care for, or someone we know is having a hard time, we are feeling it right away. And if we have low tolerance internally to be with discomfort, to be with pain, to be with grief, then we're certainly going to have very low tolerance to be with other people in their pain or discomfort or wounds. And so then it's very easy, I would imagine, during that time, if people were around you, that they either didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to feel it, or they wanted to try to fix you so that way they wouldn't have to feel it. They wouldn't have to feel the feelings of just seeing you in pain and feeling helpless around that. And so one thing I really practice when I'm with people in big challenging moments, and I have a lot of clients I work with who've had a lot of challenges and trauma and divorce and, huge things that they've gone through, is I just take deep breaths and I just soothe my own system, and I allow almost like the ripples and the waves of my own sadness. And I cry a lot in sessions with clients and with friends who are sharing. I let myself cry, I let myself feel, but I just imagine it's kind of like these waves going through me, and I don't try to block them or resist them. So I think that's been a huge thing, is breath, and then just kind of allowing the waves of feeling to move through me. And I find that when I do that, I then am more available to share my heart with that client or with that friend, because I'm here in my body. I'm not trying to block things. And my experience from others is that then they are like, oh, I can bring this to you because you're here with me, and then you can share your heart with me. And I guess the other thing I would just invite for people is just to ask questions. Like I had an experience the other day where someone shared with me that they lost a child. And I suddenly felt really awkward. Like, oh my God, what do I say? And what do I do? And like, whoa, that feels like too big. And I was like, Juna, just see if you can ask a question, because I could sense this person was hungry to just be with me in that experience. I was like, tell me about him. And I just said, tell me about him. What was he like? And it just opened up the energy. And I noticed in that moment, I was like, oh, I want to change the subject. I was like, no, just ask that question. So those would be kind of two tips I would offer people in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I love that about the questions. It's so simple, but it's really can be hard in the moment because people are so worried about asking the wrong question. Like they're worried about, don't say the person's name that they lost, don't bring it up. But then it starts to feel like nobody wants to talk to me. Everybody like wants to like avoid me, and I just need to be like fine and good. I have been surprised. I don't think I've ever been asked a question that triggered me, that made me feel worse. I think, thankfully I've been surrounded with people that are pretty empathic, considerate, kind humans. And all of the new people that came into my life after his death, there was just a genuineness. So I love that of, if it's coming from your heart and you're really open and you really want to support, you can't get it wrong. I mean, even the people in my life that said things that weren't the right thing to say, they meant well. And so you can kind of discern that when you're in it, like that was not the right thing to say. And also it's not as hurtful as it could be because I understand that they meant well. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, there is something really powerful about, just having people with us in those hardest places who aren't trying to fix us or, move on to the next thing or the next subject, but just having presence and love. And then, like you said, that people can just ask questions. And even it could just be as simple as, how are you feeling? Or tell me more about that. Like it could just be really simple questions. Because I know for me, when I've been in big, huge waves of grief, and I went through it with a divorce and was in some big stuff around a breakup and coming out of a psychologically abusive relationship, like there is something where I just wanted space to talk about it, because that really facilitates the healing, is just having that open space to be mirrored and heard and loved.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're open to it, I would love to hear you share a little bit about the divorce or one of the breakups or anything from your life that, because the book, which and also this series is really looking at these moments that we go through, and they can be big things like loss and grief, trauma and abuse, depression, and they can also be those life transitions like a divorce or a job loss or a relocation or a close relationship coming to an end, like these moments where we're going about our life and maybe there was some buildup and, we had some awareness that things weren't right, but there's the moment where everything kind of falls apart or comes undone. And we're still in the middle of this life that we're living, this life that we have, the clients that we work with, the work, the family, like we're in the middle of this very active life that we have cultivated and built, and suddenly we're going through this thing that to one degree or another is disorienting. And so I would just love to hear your experience, anyone that you feel like sharing, around being in one of those situations and what it was like for you to do that work, to reorient to your own life in the aftermath of it.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And yeah, actually, in reading your book, it really stirred for me what happened in my own divorce, and just reading like different experiences and different sections of the book, I was like, oh yeah, I so related to different things you experienced. Yeah, I'd say that in my breakup with my husband at the time, that one really was a big one for me. We were only together, we were, engaged and together for like 3 years, and then got married. And 6 months after our wedding, he suddenly just realized he didn't want to be married anymore. And in the middle of that, we had shot hundreds of relationship videos, and we had an online course we were leading.
Really good stuff too.
Oh, you were in it. That's right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So in the middle of him telling me this, we were leading that online course all about creating a thriving relationship. And I was like, do we cancel the course? Like the whole thing was the biggest blow to my ego and my heart that I could have ever imagined. And I felt myself at first just scrambling to try to hold it all together. But we did, after those 6 months, after that 6 month period, he did come back, and we realized we wanted to try to work on things. And about a year and a half later, we fully decided to let it all go. But the grief was massive. And I think it was the grief of the dream. It was the grief of the whole, like, he was my best friend. And so the loss of that friendship, the loss of the love, the loss of the dream, it was major. And it was a huge identity crisis for me too. And then also I think on social media, just because we had such a big presence, or at least, a small presence, but we put ourselves out there a lot. It was a blow to my ego. And that also was just a big thing for me at that time. So, how did I navigate the grief? At times I wanted to run away from it. At times I wanted to dissociate, but I let myself just sob and cry and journal and get lots of therapy and dance. I'd use dance as a way to move the energy. And there was actually a gift, and I kept working with clients during that time. And it felt like, because I had to show up for other people, it really kind of, in those 30-minute or 60-minute sessions, I got to step out of my world, which felt like the most devastating thing in the universe, and get to work with a client who had just had a miscarriage, or work with a client whose husband is dying of cancer, or work with a client who just went through a breakup. And so it gave me this little, like, oh, there's another world out there. And it was kind of a gift, to give me a little bit of perspective and space. And I also noticed during that time, because I was so in what was happening for me was just so acute, I was in some ways more present than I've ever been. And so my sessions in some ways were more potent.
Yeah.
I don't know if that fully, I'm curious if you have any other questions about that, but I think that was those were some of the things that really were highlights for me during that time.
Yeah, no, I think that that's perfect. It's something that, and I talked about this in one of the other interviews, but I think it's worth repeating, is those waves of grief, how intense they can be, and how normal and easy it is to want to resist them.
Yeah.
And for me, I really did believe that, like, I was not going to survive them. And it wasn't like, it didn't make sense logically. Like, I don't know how many people have died from crying. I don't think it's that many. But it was like, it was so intense that it felt like it was going to rip me apart. Like, somehow the grief inside of me, like the tears coming out weren't enough to release the pressure, that it was just like, I was just going to explode, or like, and still I had that intuitive knowing, like, there was nothing else to do but to surrender to it.
Yeah.
Not knowing how long it was going to be, how painful it was going to get. Was I going to survive it? Like, was I going to be a shell on the other side of it? Just like, I don't know if I have a point other than like repeating that. Like, I think that that's really normal. Like, we want to pull away from it, but the dropping into it, and maybe you have some more thoughts on that kind of experience of what happens when you do. For me, it didn't necessarily fix anything immediately. It didn't necessarily make it all better, but there was a lightness. And it was like every time it came up, it was an opportunity to empty more of it out. Mm-hmm. There's so much of it. Like, I'm still amazed. It's 5 years since his death, and randomly all month. And I think it's heightened because I'm going through this process of releasing the story in the book, which starts with his death. Like, how much grief there still is inside of me, like how much sadness can still come up to be moved through. And so I don't know if you have any more like thoughts or reflections on that process of surrendering to it, and you can survive it. And it's just like, it's healthy and it's necessary, and it's also really awful.
Yeah. It's awful, and it is some of the most important work I think we can do. And again, you know, reading your book, it really took me back to that time of my divorce. And then, you know, after my breakup with my husband, I fell deeply in love with someone way too quickly, and we dove head first into a deeply loving relationship, and that kind of ended 7 months later, really suddenly. And that's where like the deepest part of my grief started to emerge, where it literally felt like a darkness was stalking me, and every day the darkness was still there, and it felt like a monster like in my closet that was just slowly eating at me. And it was the most excruciating, painful thing. And like you, I knew I had to turn towards it, that there was no escaping it with medication or, you know, running off to some island. Like I had to turn towards this and feel it, and in some ways let it consume me. And just like you said so beautifully, Stephanie, it didn't kill me. And that actually surprised me, because I was like, oh man, this thing is going to consume me.
Yeah.
And it didn't, but it was the most painful thing. And my sense of it now, looking back, was that grief is a door that can be, you know, triggered open through a breakup, but that once you actually allow, like you step through the door, it's all the griefs start to move through of our whole life or lifetimes or generations. Like it all began to move, and it was a cathartic and very healing, even though terrible and terrifying process. But it felt like it actually literally exercised my heart and opened my heart, my capacity to love.
Yeah.
And so now there's a feeling now years later where I'm starting to fall in love for the first time, like again. And I'm literally like, oh my gosh, my heart is 3 or 4 times bigger than it's ever been. And it includes me, and it includes the world, as well as like this person I'm falling in love with. So there's something about grief, and when we allow it to work us and work through us, I feel like it literally expands our heart and our capacity to feel love.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so beautifully put, that the expansion, like it's that it feels like it's ripping it apart and it's breaking it down and it's cracking you open. And it does, though. It does, like, it makes it bigger. And it's really, you did it beautifully. It's really hard to explain what that's like. And it's really hard, I think, to believe that that's possible when you're still in the midst of it.
When you're in it. Yeah. You're like, no, I want the blue pill to make this go away. Like, what do I do? Yeah, it is. It's hard to believe that.
Yeah.
But here we are on the other side saying, no, it's true. It's true, I promise. And it's terrible to be in it too. We remember. We know.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I would be curious to hear more about. I know for me, going through this, like the cracking open and the being in the middle of my life and not being able to relate to any of it or just jump back into it and be the person I was before, it forced me to face a lot of my programming, a lot of my old patterns, a lot of my old ways of being, like to look at each relationship, family, friendships, professional, and because I couldn't just be who I was before, it was like it made me look at where I wasn't being aligned with who I really was and what I really wanted. So it was like, it felt like something in me broke and suddenly I was different. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that in certain things, but for the most part, now that I look back, I can see that it stripped everything away that wasn't aligned. It was like I did not have the ability or capacity to show up in a way that wasn't true to me. And I could see all the places and relationships much more clearly where I had been doing that because I couldn't anymore. And I don't know if you experienced that, but for me, there was a lot of untangling of subconscious beliefs and programming and patterns, and like really looking at and renegotiating my relationships and how I engaged with my life.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true and so well put. And again, I think that was like one of the big takeaways from reading your book was how this journey of grief, it really did. It's like you could have resisted it, but you allowed it to kind of move through your whole being and take away and help you disentangle from the parts of yourself that really weren't you and weren't aligned with you. And that's kind of my sense, again, of emotions and the wisdom of big emotions. They're like with grief, with anger, with even love. When they move through us, it's like a tidal wave that dismantles and unhooks parts of our ego that we've become fused with or over-identified with. Yeah. And so there's some kind of wisdom to these waves of an emotion and how they're actually saying, no, this isn't you anymore. It strips away the beliefs, the ideas, the identities, and it's painful. It's like, oh gosh, but no, I thought I was the sweet, nice one, or I thought I was always the friend who shows up for everybody. And it's like, nope, just strip it away. I'm an asshole today, and this is who I am. This is just what's true. Oops, I don't know if I can swear. Totally. But anyway, so it's just, there's something really powerful about trusting also the wisdom of this emotion, that it's leading you to, even though it's excruciating in the moment, it's actually leading you to live a life that's more congruent, and it's leading you to be more fully who you truly are on the other side of it, even though in the moment you might be a little bit of a mess.
Yeah. And one reason I was really excited to have you on, despite the fact that I love you and everything you say is wonderful and brilliant, is, and you did your TED Talk on anger. It's a great TED Talk. If you guys want to Google it, check it out. I did not have a relationship with my anger before my loss.
Yeah.
And I had like the anger that came up with the grief, like the waves of it felt like totally irrational and random. Like I was so mad at him for just leaving me here. Even though I had broken up with him and I may never have seen him again. It was like this, there was so much rage and anger. But even after that, like learning to embrace and feel my anger. And I was so afraid of it. I thought it was wrong. I thought that I shouldn't be feeling it. It didn't always make sense to me. I think there was so much of it that had been stuffed down that when it would get triggered, if I was angry about something, it's like there was a lot of anger behind it at all the other people and experiences over the years. But the more that I've allowed myself to feel my anger and to be with it, the more it's shifted. It's like I can't stay mad at the person or a situation that triggered me to be angry anymore. It's like it immediately expands and it becomes this like really powerful energy that shows me where I want to set a boundary, what I'm not okay with anymore. And a lot of the times fuels my work. Like I get really mad about, like someone might do something and instead of staying upset with them, it's like I'm mad at society for creating this culture that behaves this way or doesn't know these things or would lead to this person saying such a thing to me or doing such a thing. Like there's so much power and wisdom in our anger. And I know that I think you did a whole course. Was it a course on anger? And your TED Talk, and you've been working on your relationship with anger. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about that.
I just love how you shared all of that, first of all. And yeah, I would just agree that there's a deep wisdom in anger. And there's kind of like, if you think about anger, there's kind of like the adult anger, which is like the wise anger, like that really has this capacity to hold boundaries and see truth with kind of laser-like precision. Like there's no BS. Like when anger, like the pure wise anger is online, we cut through the BS, we see truth. We also can see where there's boundaries that have been crossed or boundaries that need to be held. And we also really can see with laser-like precision what needs to be supported or valued that isn't being fully supported or valued. So anger at its essence to me really is love. It's like our big, huge heart that loves and cares for these things internally or externally in the world around us and wants to safeguard, protect them, uphold them. And then there's kind of like the more teenage anger, which wants to attack others, blame, finger point, stir up drama, or maybe underneath that teenager is just like, oh, I'm feeling deeply hurt or wounded right now, so I'm going to wear anger in order to feel kind of more powerful and less vulnerable in this particular moment. So there's the kind of, I like for myself to really be kind of in discernment when anger comes up. Now I'm like, okay, is this my more young anger, or is this kind of more my like adult truth, clear seeing anger that's online right now? And then really ask myself, okay, what most needs to happen? As opposed to reacting, which like the teenager wants to do. I'm like, okay, now let's take some breaths. Let's come into what's really true. And anger will keep bubbling up again and again until we take some kind of action. So that's where I'm like, okay, what action needs to be taken? Maybe it's me just even changing how I communicate, or setting a boundary with someone, or having that conversation instead of avoiding it. So that's some of the ways I really like to work with anger now. But yeah, like you, I also just was terrified when this emotion started to come up for the first time really in my life. I was like, oh, I'm not the angry girl. I'm nice and sweet. And suddenly I'm like, rage is just moving through me every single day. And how to best work with that when that happens. Yeah. Not easy work.
No, not at all. And it can feel like when you've spent most of your life, I don't know that I would have called myself a people pleaser then, but I can look back and say I really, like, that was my strategy. Like, I could really intuit whatever was wanted or needed, be the best version of it, make sure everybody was happy. And it felt like such an abrasive swing to the other end of the spectrum when I started working with my anger and setting boundaries even, or when I went through my whole honey badger phase of my health, my life and my health literally depended on me honoring my needs and setting boundaries and saying what was true when it was true. I felt like such an asshole. I felt like such a jerk, like an inconsiderate. And the reality is, it was just so different than how I was used to showing up. Yeah. I was still being as kind and considerate as I could. Like, I was still aware of other people and trying to consider that as much as I was able, but I wasn't putting their needs before mine. And so it's like this pendulum swing where you're just like, it feels so awful when you've been such a nice people pleaser your whole life.
Yep. It's terrifying. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose these friendships or these relationships, or people aren't going to like me when I'm not. My largest, most prized commitment isn't to caretaking the needs of others. My biggest commitment now is to listening to myself and living an authentic life. And it doesn't mean I still don't care for others, but it's not kind of the compass from which I, direct everything else.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary when anger comes in like that. And now in retrospect, what a gift, because it has this Kali-esque energy where it just kind of shreds through everything. And it's like, no, you can't play that game anymore.
Yeah.
You can't do that stuff anymore. It doesn't let us.
Yeah. What is one thing or several things that you would share with anybody who's navigating this rising up and coming back? So they're in this place of feeling disoriented inside their own life and really having to figure out how to step into what comes next, like let go of who they were and figure out who they're becoming. What's something that you would leave them with?
I'd say, if you're terrified right now, you're not alone. That is completely normal to be scared. And I'd also say that this kind of situation, this unraveling, is like a huge gift. And it might not seem like it in the moment, but is the biggest gift in disguise. Because ultimately, it's life moving through you to open you to become more of who you really are. And sometimes this process of stripping away all that is not you is really uncomfortable. It can last days or months or even years, but it is the most important work, because otherwise you're going to be living a false life. And this life is too precious to be doing it and not be the real you. It's too darn precious.
Yeah.
And this life wants you to show up and be the real you. And so I guess what I just offer them is stay with the process, trust the process, but keep the energy moving, through dance, through journaling, through talking to people, art, like just keep the energy moving and trust the process. Exercise, all of those things help us kind of being exercised literally and figuratively by this process. So it's an important one.
Yeah, I love that. And how can people learn from you, play with you, work with you?
They can find me on my website, junamustad.com. You can also check out, as you said, my TED Talk. Such a passion around emotional intelligence and specifically emotions we want to avoid, like anger. And that talk is called Anger is Your Ally on YouTube. I think those are probably the best ways.
Okay, awesome. And I just want to say how grateful I am to you. I know I've said that to you in our sessions, and I tell you that a lot, but I really am. When we first started working together, that was my intention of I want to step into who I'm here to be. I want to show up fully expressed. Was so interested and fascinated by that expression of fully expressed. What does that mean? I want to be fully expressed. And you have really helped me in so many ways over the years, both with myself and in my relationships and my healing and also my business. I come back to what is it that's right for me? What is it that I need to be doing in order to continue moving in that direction in the most loving and gentle way? I've never felt I've never felt pushed. I've never felt like I was being made wrong. It's you hold this space that is just open to come as you are, where you're at. Everything is perfect. Nothing is wrong. You can work with whatever is there in the moment. And you do it in such a way that, like I said before, I always feel like you're guiding me back to what I already know, because it's somewhere in me, right? It's somewhere in my body or my awareness or my consciousness or just my life plan, my path. And you're just so elegantly able to steer me back in that direction. So to anyone who's listening, Juna is amazing. I value her so much. I will probably continue working with her until she stops doing this, if that ever happens. I find her work to be so valuable when I'm feeling unclear, or when I'm scared, or when it's I just feel like I can't seem to get clear or take action or move forward, or I feel like I'm missing something. And there's a lot of times where I feel very indecisive. It's I already kind of know what I want to do, but then my doubt is coming up, or my fear, or it's I'm distracted by all the things. And so Juna and her work is just so powerful at bringing you home to what's true for you really quickly, really gently, really lovingly. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. That was hard to even take all that in. I was oh my gosh, she's just giving me a huge love bomb right now. So thank you. And just to really reflect back, it's been such an honor to work with you and to read your book. I hope as many people as possible read this book and get to receive the wisdom and the medicine of it, because it's profound. It's such a profound gift. So thank you. And just such an honor to be here with you today.
So go find Juna, junamustad.com. Follow her on social media. She has a book coming soon, and you share a lot of really great content. So thank you again so much for being here and sharing your gifts with us.
Such an honor, such a pleasure. Love you.
Love you too.